Poor workers vote for a billionaire.
Yeah, they will. They have. It's not a theoretical question.
No, it's not a theory, it's reality.
I'm maybe more hopeful about you than you are.
From your point of view, I should ask you if there is enough space to choose, and does it make any sense choosing?
I think the question about choosing is, for us in Europe, the question is how can we be more insulated from what is happening in places like America? And how do we become better Europeans? It's not just a military question, it's an economic question too. I've lived for a long time in Britain, as you know, and the British thought they could survive by choosing to go alone, and you know, it's not
Truth.
It's not true. Life has deteriorated. So I think that's a big choice. That will Europe be one thing, and what can citizens do to make that happen? The will is there. It's maybe that the politicians fail us.
Some words about the political environment where small homelands close in ethnic and religious identities seems to prevail over the paradigm of the multicultural society. Is the society of diversity, exchanges, and contamination ended, and now just part of the woke rhetoric? And what does it mean, this new global leadership of the far right, for the kind of future we are building, election after the election?
If you went into a school in London or in New York, I don't know again about Milano, you would find people of different races, different ethnicities, very indifferent about it. So in a way, the opposition, whether people are, say whether they're a foreigner or a native, is something that's constructed, which young people don't tend to feel so much. And to me, the interesting thing is, why is it among young people, once they're out of school, that somehow it begins to matter more? And I think the reasons for that are economic, really. That, you know, if you have a good job and you have prospects for the future, you're not so worried about the other. Do you know what I mean? But if you don't have good prospects, and then you begin to think, well, it's because of the other that I don't have these prospects. We even know, you know, statistically that's the case, that people who are well employed are much more indifferent to these kinds of questions. That's particularly true in the United States. I mean, we've just elected a fascist leader who has commanded a lot of votes from young whites and blacks. But the one thing they have in common is that they have very poor quality work. So I think there's an economic basis to this.
Poor workers vote for a billionaire.
Yeah, they will. They have. It's not a theoretical question.
No, it's not a theory, it's reality.
Yeah. Well, particularly with young people, you know, it's hard for them to measure what they're hearing. It's interesting to me that a week after Trump is there, that his popularity is sunk already among young people. And so the question is, why were they seduced into voting for him? Because it's really extraordinary that he is within days, you know, he has become. Many of the people who voted for him are now dissatisfied, but there's very little they're going to be able to do. He has power and so on. So,
in your book, Richard, Corrosion of Character: The Personal Consequences of Work in the New Capitalism, you coin categories that capture the inner traits of mature capitalism and its impacts on the personal life of the contemporary workman: precariousness, adaptability, uncertainty, instability in life trajectories, and affective relationships. So I ask you, what are the consequences from your point of view of these impacts, not for the single workers, but for the society the workers are living?
well, I think what it does is creates a very, as a compensation for all of this list you have, of very rigid categories of belonging, so that people can, if you're in your everyday work life subject to a lot of precarity, your politics are going to be just the reverse of that. What is subtle about this process is how people act on this. You can have a very categorical way of thinking, but not observe those categories in your everyday experience. For instance, you can be, as many British working class people are, very racist, and yet you make an exception for black people you actually work with. And I would imagine the same thing is going to be true in Italy. So what you get is more of a kind of, they're very powerful images, I mean, you know, of this us against them sort of thing. But in the actual workplace, and perhaps in the community, they don't matter so much. Where they matter is in politics, because then they can be colonized, as they have been. And the question is, why do people prefer fake news, if you want to put it this way, to real news?
So you can choose of being in the fake world or not.
Of course you can. It's, you know, the problem with it is that it makes of ordinary people, it takes away their agency. They're just manipulated by media and so on. I've never thought that's a very good explanation. I think it goes deeper, that there's something in people where they really, collectively, they want to surrender their liberty. And that's a more profound problem. And it was, you know, identified long ago by a French thinker, Etienne de Boetie, when he talked about voluntary servitude, which means it's not that I have been overwhelmed by fake, but I reach out to the fake because it's easier. It means I surrender. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to draw on my experience. It's just there. I give you an example. Trump now says that all Latinos are rapists and murderers. Now, anyone knows this is ridiculous, but they voted for him. Why is that? Because that's something in which you surrender your own agency. People want to do that. It's not that they're stupid, but that this is easier. Choosing requires effort, and people are and have been, they would prefer not to make the effort. So
this is the point.
Yeah, I think that's the point. It's not that they're stupid. It's not that the
easier
Microsoft
way.
Microsoft has made them into robots. But it's something we have to think about. And then the question is, well, how do you rouse people to make that effort? In my generation, people were roused, after the Second World War, because we had this terrible example of what happened to our parents. This is true. America, Europe, so on. You had a very energized population, and you also had economic conditions which were good. And they went together. You had strong syndicates, people made that sort of effort. Now syndicates is kind of empty, kind of worlds. With very young people, they tend to be very socially isolated. It's a deeper problem than blaming the media.
Richard, you have repeatedly addressed the concept of disorder.
Right.
It is said that our age is the age of global disorder. The question is, isn't the idea of disorder being called up to increase the sense of powerlessness that pervades us? Is it part of a strategy made up by someone or by the modern and financial capitalism by itself in order to make more money or more power in the state of chaos?
And the reason that I wrote books like The Uses of Disorder was to show the ways in which, at a local level, conflict and disagreement is a way to engage people in trying to give more shape to their own lives. I think the perception that this, monopoly capitalism is anarchic is a very dangerous one. With Trump, for instance, the notion that he's chaotic is not borne out by the facts of how he, at least the first time around, he gives the appearance of being very chaotic. But in fact, it's a very steady shift of power in things like healthcare and education, from serving the masses to serving a small elite. That's why my first book was called The Uses of Disorder, because I do think there are uses of it. And I also think it keeps, the more experience you have of managing disorder, the less violent you tend to be, because you see that you're capable every day of dealing with it. That's what kept cities like Rome or New York or Paris going after the Second World War, is that there's a lot of disorder, and rather than become violent with each other, all sorts of everyday managements that people made to keep things under control.
Richard, coming to the end, we work on the history of politics and the trends of the economic and social changes. Now we are in Italy, in this part of Europe, and recent law by this government works against the use of the city and the public spaces for political reasons and activism. They decided to set the activists as criminals. So I should ask you, what does it mean from your point of view to take off the public spaces from the political debate?
It's terrible. I mean, this is a question for you. How much can you resist this locally? I mean, the same thing was tried in Britain when the Conservatives were in power, to remove the public space from the public realm. And people just ignored it. And the police even ignored it. It wasn't worth it. it wasn't worth it. It's a question for you. These are laws passed. Can you resist them? Or will you give in? I am maybe more hopeful about you than you are.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.